My mom snapped, "Your sister gets the down payment, so empty your savings and stop acting bitter." I held up the texts and said, "Nice try. I already moved the money and sent your promise to my uncle." The worst part was that I almost did it. I almost sat there at that kitchen table and let my mother turn my savings into a family donation because I was tired, and because she was loud, and because for most of my life I had been trained to confuse pressure with obligation. The whole thing started as a normal Sunday dinner. That is what still annoys me when I think about it. Nothing about that day felt like the beginning of a disaster. It was just lasagna, cheap wine, my sister pretending her kids were not destroying the living room, and my mother acting overly cheerful in that way she did when she had already decided what everyone else was going to do. I had just gotten off a 10-hour shift, and I was wearing the same work boots I had worn all day because I had forgotten to bring a clean pair of shoes. I remember being irritated about that more than anything else. I had spent the morning at the warehouse dealing with a broken pallet jack, and then the afternoon arguing with a supplier about a late shipment that had nothing to do with me. By the time I got to my mother's house, all I wanted was a plate of food and 20 minutes of silence. Instead, my mother was looking at me like she had been waiting all day to corner me. My sister, Megan, was sitting beside her husband with a hand over her stomach, smiling the way people do when they are about to ask for money and want to look grateful while doing it. Even before anybody said anything, I had the sense that the room had been arranged around a conversation I did not know about. I should have trusted that feeling right away. Instead, I kept helping my nephew build a tower out of forks and salt shakers, while pretending not to notice the way my mother kept glancing toward me. I had been saving money for almost 5 years. It was not a fortune, but it was enough that I could finally see a house at the end of it. I had been renting the same small duplex since my divorce, and every month I moved money into a high-yield account that nobody else knew the balance of except me. That account represented the first stable thing I had built for myself in a long time. So when my mother brought up Megan's new place, I thought she was just making conversation. She talked about how nice it would be for Megan and Tyler to stop renting. She said the market was terrible and that a family should help family when one of them finally found something worth buying. Then she said the part that made my stomach go cold. She said they had found a house, and the only thing standing between them and closing was the down payment. I looked at Megan. Megan looked at the table. Tyler looked at my mother like he already knew this speech had been rehearsed. My mother turned to me and said the amount as if she were asking me to pass the salt. It was nearly all of my savings, not all of it, but enough to wreck my plans for at least another year. I laughed because I thought she was joking. That was my first mistake. She did not laugh back. She said I was the only one who could handle it, and that I was being dramatic if I acted like this was some kind of sacrifice. I asked her why Megan and Tyler had already started house shopping if they could not afford the down payment. She told me not to be bitter. That was when I realized this was not a request, it was a performance, and I was the only person in the room who had not been given his lines. I have to explain something about my family. I was the one who paid on time. I was the one who kept records. I was the one who answered the phone when the electric bill was late, and the one who got called when somebody needed a ride to the airport or a co-signature or help filling out a form. Megan was the younger one. She had always been the one with the emergencies. If she needed something, it became everybody's problem. If I needed something, it became a lesson in responsibility. That dynamic had existed for so long that I had almost stopped seeing it. My father left when I was 16, and after that my mother turned into a person who survived by making other people into roles. I became the dependable one. Megan became the fragile one, and my mother became the judge of which of us deserved what. The weird thing was that I had spent years telling myself I was fine with it. I was not. I was just used to it. That night, sitting at her table, I could feel the old script trying to pull me back in. My mother said Megan had kids. My mother said Tyler was working hard. My mother said I was single, which she always used like it was evidence of spare resources instead of loneliness. My mother said I had been doing well for years, and it was time to stop acting possessive. I asked how she knew what was in my savings. That got her attention. She told me she did not need to know every detail to know I was being selfish. Megan finally spoke up and said they were not trying to take anything from me. That was almost insulting, because the entire conversation had been about taking. Tyler stayed quiet the whole time, which I later understood was because he had probably already been told not to interfere. I told them I was not discussing my savings at dinner. My mother said that was exactly the kind of bitter little attitude that kept me alone. I remember staring at her face and realizing she was genuinely angry with me for not immediately surrendering. That was the moment I started paying attention, not just to her words, to everything. The way Megan kept looking at her phone, the way Tyler had not touched his wine, the way my mother had my name on her lips too quickly as if she had said it many times before I got there. I left that night without agreeing to anything. My mother walked me to the door and acted offended that I would not make a decision on the spot. She told me Megan needed help. She told me I could always rebuild my account. She told me that family was supposed to be generous. I told her I would think about it. That was a lie. I knew the answer already. I just did not know why she was so certain I would cave. The next morning, I started replaying the conversation in my head while I made coffee in my apartment. That is when the smaller details started coming back. For the previous month, Megan had been weirdly interested in my money. Not directly at first. Just casual questions that did not sound casual once I thought about them. She asked whether I still used the same bank I had opened after my divorce. She asked whether I kept most of my savings in checking or in something separate. She asked whether I got paper statements or only alerts. At the time, I had assumed she was just making conversation. Now I realized she had been collecting information. My mother had also been asking questions. She had wanted to know whether I had a joint account with anyone. She had wanted to know if I had changed my beneficiary forms. She had wanted to know whether I used online banking or preferred to go in person. At the time, I had found it annoying. Now it felt organized. There was a difference. My mother was not a subtle person. When she wanted something, she usually bulldozed straight at it. But in this case, she had clearly been building something behind the scenes. I went through my messages. I checked the family group chat. I looked at the random texts from Megan and Tyler and my mother over the past few weeks. Nothing obvious jumped out at first, but there was one thing that did. 3 days before the dinner, my mother had texted me asking whether I could stop by and help her scan some old tax paperwork. I had ignored the request because I was working late, and because my mother always had a way of turning any small favor into a half-day task. Now I wondered why she wanted scanning help at all. I also remembered that when I had been at her house the weekend before, she had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she went outside to yell at a delivery driver about the wrong groceries. I had seen a notification light up. I had not planned on looking at it. But the message preview was from my uncle, Ray, and it contained my name. That made me stop. Ray was my mother's older brother. He was the only person in our family who had ever treated money like a tool instead of a magic solution. He had worked at a credit union for 30 years before retiring. He kept track of everything. Receipts, transfers, statements, dates, account numbers, all of it. He had helped me open my first serious savings account after my divorce because he did not trust my mother's opinion on finance, and he had said so openly in front of her. I remember that well because she had spent the whole drive home complaining that Ray made things feel colder than they needed to be. I unlocked my own phone and started a new message draft to him, then stopped. I did not want to sound paranoid. I wanted to be wrong. So I did something I had not done in years. I checked my accounts carefully, not just the balance, the access, the backup contact, the recovery email, the linked devices. The old phone number I had forgotten was still attached to one of my accounts. That was the first real red flag. It had been my old number from the year after the divorce, and I had not used it in forever. I remembered that I had once given my mother temporary access to my phone while mine was being repaired. I also remembered that she loved helping herself to administrative things under the excuse of helping me. The more I checked, the more uneasy I got. Nothing had been moved yet. Nothing had been touched. But there were signs that somebody had been digging around in the edges of my financial life. I changed passwords. I updated security questions. I turned on two-factor authentication everywhere. Then I made a decision that felt dramatic at the time and completely necessary now. I moved the savings. Not all of it at once, because I did not want to trip any fraud alerts, and I did not want to do anything that looked weird to my own bank. I split it into 2 transfers over 3 days. One went into a new account at the credit union Ray recommended. The other went into a separate high-yield account I opened in my own name only. I also left a small amount behind in the old account so that any casual glance would not immediately scream that I had emptied it. That part mattered more than I expected. My family had a way of treating any boundary as evidence of guilt. If I had completely drained the account overnight, my mother would have framed it as me hiding money from the family. Leaving a little behind made the move look like what it actually was. A precaution, not an attack. After I moved the money, I texted Ray and asked if he had a minute. He called me 10 minutes later. He did not waste time. He asked what my mother had done. That was how I knew I was not the first person to worry about this. I told him about the dinner, about the pressure, about Megan's new house, and about the weird questions from the last month. He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked if my mother had mentioned any repayment plan. I said no. He sighed in this tired way that told me he had already seen the pattern before. He told me that my mother had called him earlier that week and said I had agreed to help Megan with the down payment. He said she had used language that made it sound settled. He said she told him I was the only one in the family with enough savings to make it happen quickly. He asked me if I had said any of that. I laughed, but it came out short and ugly. No, I said, I had not. That is when he told me to keep everything: texts, voicemails, screenshots, bank records, times, and dates. He said to stop talking to my mother about money in any way that could be twisted later. He said he would help if I needed it. I was still holding onto the idea that maybe this was just one of my mother's usual pressure campaigns, and that if I stayed calm, it would pass. Ray sounded like he was already thinking 3 steps ahead. He asked me whether I wanted to know what my mother had told him she was promising Megan. That was the first time I felt my stomach really turn. Apparently she had told him I would cover the down payment now and that later. When Megan sold her current place or got some money from a family settlement, everything would balance out. There was no family settlement. There was no upcoming payout. That was just a story she had made up so the numbers looked temporary. Ray told me she had also implied that I was the kind of brother who would not want to see Megan lose a house over a technicality. He said that was nonsense. He said he had known my mother long enough to recognize when she was borrowing confidence from other people. He told me not to argue with her until I had proof in front of me. That was good advice. I hate that he was right. For the next 2 days I said almost nothing to anyone. I still went to work. I still answered emails. I still bought groceries and paid a parking ticket and took my trash out. That was part of what made the whole thing feel so surreal. I was living a normal week while my mother apparently ran a private financial campaign using my name. On Tuesday, Megan texted me a picture of a kitchen backsplash and asked if I thought it was too dark. I stared at the message for a full minute. That was when I understood that she either truly believed this was happening or she was pretending not to know how ugly it was. I wrote back that I was not discussing real estate through pictures of tile. She did not reply for 6 hours. Then she sent a thumbs up. My mother called that night. I let it ring. She called again. I let that ring too. Then she sent a voice message saying she was disappointed in me and that I had always been difficult when other people needed me. I saved the voice message. On Wednesday, I opened my email and found a forwarded mortgage pre-approval summary in my spam folder. That is the moment everything changed. It had been sent to me from a broker I had never contacted. The body of the message was short and sloppy. It referenced an application number and included a soft inquiry on my credit score. I had never authorized it. I sat there at my desk reading it twice, because my brain refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. Someone had used my information, or at least enough of my information, to try to move around me. It was not a full mortgage application in my name. It was a pre-approval request to estimate what sort of funding I might be able to contribute. A soft pull, a leverage play, the kind of thing people do when they are trying to make a case before they ever have permission. I called the broker. I spent 15 minutes on hold, and then another 10 explaining that I had not submitted anything and that I wanted the inquiry documented. The broker was polite in the cold way people are when they are used to nonsense. He told me the request had come in through a referral email and a scanned ID file. A scanned ID file. I closed my eyes. I knew exactly what had happened. My mother had scanned one of my old documents when I was at her house helping with taxes. She had probably taken a copy of my license or a pay stub from the folder I had left on her counter. Or maybe she had simply asked for it and I had not thought much of it. I had made 1,000 tiny allowances in my life because family was supposed to mean a little less caution. This was the price of those allowances. I asked the broker to send me everything he could. He said he would. Then I called Ray again. This time he was not surprised. That honestly made it worse. He asked me if I wanted to come by his place after work. I said yes. When I got there, he had printed out the text thread he had with my mother. Not all of it. Enough. He had highlighted the parts where she implied I had already agreed. He had also printed the inquiry notice and the broker email I had forwarded him. Ray spread everything out on his kitchen table and went through it like he was reviewing a case file. He kept saying the same thing in different words. My mother was trying to create agreement after the fact. That phrase stuck in my head. Create agreement after the fact. That was exactly what she always did. She would decide something was fair, then behave as if the decision had already been made by consensus. If nobody stopped her fast enough, the lie became the family version of the truth. Ray told me to prepare for a confrontation, but not yet. He said the worst thing I could do was let my mother surprise me in front of other people. He said people like her rely on social pressure and embarrassment. He said if I was going to refuse, I needed witnesses. That advice sounded manipulative until I thought about how many times in my life I had been trapped in corners with my mother because I was trying to be polite. The next family dinner was supposed to be Friday. My mother was hosting again because my grandfather's birthday had just passed, and she wanted to use the occasion as a normal excuse for everyone to gather. I knew something would happen there. I just did not know exactly what. So I spent Thursday evening making sure I was ready. I moved the last visible money out of the old savings account so the balance would not tempt anyone who had access to my login history. I printed statements. I saved screenshots. I backed up my texts to cloud storage. I changed every password one more time. Then I sent Ray copies of everything. I also sent him the voice message where my mother called me difficult and disappointed. He replied with one line telling me not to delete anything. Friday came and I was already tired before dinner started. My mother had invited my aunt, 2 cousins, Megan, Tyler, and Ray. That detail told me everything I needed to know. She had not invited him by accident. She had invited him because she thought his presence would make her version of events sound more official. She thought he would back her up. I should have been flattered by her confidence in my compliance. Instead, I felt strangely calm. I had spent enough days thinking about the situation that the panic had burned out and left only irritation. That was useful. Anger makes people sloppy. Calm makes them readable. My mother was in a mood the second I arrived. She hugged me too hard and too briefly, the way people do when they want to be seen being affectionate. Megan was already there, which meant the script had definitely been going around without me. Tyler was helping clear dishes with that grim, polite look of a man who knows he is standing near a family trap. Ray arrived 10 minutes after I did, carrying a folder under one arm. My mother looked pleased because she assumed the folder meant he had brought supporting paperwork. What he had actually brought was evidence. We ate first. That part was almost insulting. Everybody sat around acting normal while my aunt complained about her knee, and the kids made too much noise, and my mother refilled glasses like a hostess in a commercial. I could feel the pressure building beneath the table. Nobody mentioned the down payment until dessert. Then my mother did exactly what I expected. She leaned back, looked at me with that patient, superior expression she used when she believed she had already won, and told everyone that Megan and Tyler had found their house. She said the timing was tight. She said they needed to move fast. She said she had spoken with me and that I was willing to step up for my sister. The room went quiet in the way rooms do when somebody says something outrageous but not yet outrageous enough for everyone to object. I told her that was not true. I said I had not agreed to fund anything. My mother looked offended, which was almost funny because she was the one who had made the false statement in front of witnesses. She repeated herself, slower this time, like I was a child who did not understand. She said Megan needed the help, and that I had savings, and that I was acting bitter because I thought being practical made me more important. I remember looking at Ray at that point. He did not even shake his head. He just reached into his folder and slid the papers across the table. My mother ignored the papers and kept talking over me. She said I always turned everything into a personal wound. She said family did not keep score like I did. She said I was making Megan feel ashamed for wanting a home. That was the precise moment I realized how long she had rehearsed this. This was not spontaneous. This was not her bringing up a family need in a messy way. This was a pressure campaign with costume changes. I let her keep talking until she ran out of breath. Then I said I had already moved the money. That got everyone's attention. My mother's face changed, not much, just enough. I said I had moved my savings into accounts she could not touch. I said I had changed my security, closed old access points, and documented everything. My mother started to laugh, but it was an angry, short sound. She told me I was overreacting. I said she had already sent a mortgage inquiry using my information. That stopped the room completely. Tyler turned toward Megan. Megan turned toward my mother. My aunt actually sat up straighter. My mother looked at Ray like he had betrayed her, which I found fascinating because he had done exactly nothing except not lie for her. I took out my phone and held up the screen. On it was the screenshot of her text to Ray where she had said I would cover the down payment and then it would all work out later. I had read that message 20 times, and it still made me angry in a fresh way each time because of how casual it was, like my money was a weather event, like I was not a person with a future. I told her I had sent her promise to Ray before dinner and that I had also sent the broker inquiry. I said I was not interested in being manipulated through public embarrassment anymore. My mother actually looked offended that I had used the word manipulated. That was when she snapped. She told me Megan got the down payment. She told me to empty my savings. She told me to stop acting bitter. She said it loudly enough that the kids in the next room stopped playing. It was one of the few times in my life I felt truly sorry for her because she was so used to ordering the room that she did not understand how badly she had already lost it. I did not raise my voice. I told her as calmly as I could that I was not giving her my money, not signing anything, and not discussing it again at that table. I also told her she should not have used my information to push a mortgage process. That was not a guess. That was documented. Ray finally spoke then. He did not yell either. He simply said the broker had already confirmed the information used in the inquiry had not been authorized, and that if anyone wanted to keep pretending this was normal family help, They should understand the legal risk of treating someone else's finances like a shared resource. That sentence landed harder than any shouting could have. My mother looked at him like he had stabbed her. Megan started crying, but not in a dramatic way, more like the realization had finally caught up to her. Tyler asked what inquiry Ray meant, and my mother tried to interrupt him before he could really understand. That was when he made the mistake of speaking up for himself. He said he had only been told the money was already arranged. He said he did not know my mother had been pushing it as if it were settled. He looked angry, but not with me. With her. That was the first crack. Megan turned to my mother and asked if she had actually told the broker my savings were available. My mother said she had not done anything wrong. She said she had only been trying to help. That was not the answer Megan wanted. You could see it in her face. For the first time, she was not looking at me like I was the obstacle. She was looking at our mother like she was trying to understand whether this was a misunderstanding or a lie. I did not enjoy that part, but it was necessary. Then Ray pulled out the real killer piece. He had contacted the broker and gotten an email trail. The request had been submitted with a scanned copy of one of my old documents and a note stating that I was prepared to assist with the purchase. No signature from me, no authorization, no consent. Just a paper trail built to imply agreement. The room got very quiet after that. My mother tried one more angle. She said family had always shared resources. She said I was exaggerating because money made me defensive. She said I was acting like the world would end if I helped my sister. I remember staring at her and thinking about every time I had helped without complaint. Every broken car I had paid to tow, every emergency bill, every time I had given up a weekend because someone needed a ride or a loan or a quick fix. I had never kept score because I had not thought I needed to, but she had. She had been scoring the whole time. I told her I was done being the family backup account. I told her the answer was no. I told her I had chosen not to make a scene before because I had hoped she might back down if given the chance. That was a mistake on my part, and I admitted it right there. I said I should have trusted the first strange question. I said I should have checked sooner. I said I would not be bullied again. My mother's face changed again, this time into something almost animal and furious. She accused me of embarrassing her in front of Ray. Then she accused me of ruining Megan's chance at a home. Then she accused me of being vindictive because my marriage had failed and hers had not. That last one was low even for her. The room actually made a small sound then, like everybody inhaled at once. I could feel my neck getting hot, but I was still calm enough to know exactly what was happening. She was trying to move the argument away from facts and into shame. That used to work on me. It did not work that night. I looked at Megan and told her the money was not available because it was my savings for a house, and because nobody had the right to spend it for me. I also told her that if my mother had told her otherwise, she had been lied to. That was the first time I said the word lied out loud. Megan started crying harder then, but the tears were different now. Not just because she was upset, because she was realizing she had been used too. Tyler swore under his breath and rubbed his face with both hands. My aunt looked like she wanted to leave, but she stayed because the room had turned into a wreck you could not stop staring at. My mother tried to say I was twisting everything. Ray cut her off. He said he was not interested in family storytelling. He said he was interested in documents. Then he asked her in front of everyone if she had also told him I had agreed to a gift letter. That was the real reason he had come, and I did not know it until that moment. A gift letter that would have declared my contribution to the purchase was a gift, not a loan. A gift letter would have helped the mortgage process. It also would have made the whole thing look legitimate on paper. My mother froze. Ray told her he would not sign a false statement. He said if she wanted to borrow from family, she needed actual consent from the person lending the money. That was when I saw the deepest expression of panic on her face, not because she was caught, because she had assumed everybody would keep playing their role, and now one of us had stopped. Megan stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. She asked whether my mother had already signed anything with the realtor. That question hit because it was practical, not emotional, practical, the kind of thing that real life cared about. My mother hesitated just long enough to answer indirectly, which was as good as yes. Megan's husband looked like he wanted to disappear. He finally admitted that they had put down earnest money, not enough to ruin them, enough to make everybody nervous. Now it was becoming obvious why my mother had tried so hard to force me into the role. She had already promised more than she had. She had counted on my savings to cover the gap. She had used my name and my money as a bridge over her own poor planning. And she had done it while telling everybody else I was being difficult. That was the moment I knew I had won, even though it did not feel like winning. Because the facts were finally visible, not just to me, to everyone. I did not yell, I did not threaten her. I simply told her the money was gone from the old account. The new accounts were mine alone, and I was not revisiting this conversation. Then I put my phone down, gathered my coat, and stood up. My mother called after me, saying I was leaving when my sister needed me. I said Megan needed honesty, not theft. That got a shocked silence that lasted long enough for me to feel the room settle around the sentence. Ray stood too. He said he was going with me. I had not even asked him to, but I was grateful. We made it to the front door before my mother found her voice again. She called me ungrateful. She called me heartless. She called me bitter one more time, like if she repeated it enough it would turn into fact. I did not turn around. That was harder than it sounds. Everything in me wanted to turn around and defend myself, to explain every decision and every compromise, to prove I was not the villain she wanted me to be. But I knew better by then. People like my mother do not need the truth from you. They need you to stay in the conversation long enough for them to keep rewriting it, so I left. Ray drove me home. He did not lecture me. He mostly just asked if I was okay to be alone. I said yes, though I was not entirely sure that was true. I sat in my apartment for almost an hour without turning on the TV. My phone started blowing up before I even took off my boots. First it was Megan, then my aunt, then one of my cousins, then my mother in a long series of texts that changed tone every few messages. At first she was angry, then she was hurt, then she was insisting I had misunderstood her. Then she was saying family should not make things public. That last one made me laugh out loud, which was probably the first time I had really laughed in days. Public was exactly what she had made it by bringing it to dinner. I did not reply to her. I replied to Megan. I told her I was sorry she had been put in the middle of it. I told her I had not hidden money from the family because it was never family money to begin with. I told her if she wanted to see the broker email or the text thread, I would forward them. She did not answer until the next morning. When she did, she said my mother had told her I had agreed earlier in the week and then changed my mind at the last second. She said she now understood that was not true. That message was not an apology exactly, but it was the first crack of honesty from her that I had ever gotten about our mother. I forwarded her the screenshots. Then I did something I never thought I would have to do. I sent a copy of everything to a family group chat that included the people who had been trying to tell me to keep the peace, not the whole internet, just the family. I included the mortgage inquiry, the text where my mother told Ray I had agreed, and the message where she tried to make the contribution sound settled. I did not write a speech. I did not try to sound noble. I just sent the evidence. That part mattered. People can argue with feelings forever. They have a much harder time arguing with timestamps. The response was immediate and ugly. My mother called me again and again. This time I answered once because I wanted to hear whether she would actually say anything truthful when the walls were closing in. She did not. She told me I had humiliated her. She told me Ray had no right to involve himself. She told me Megan was crying and Tyler was furious and that I was splitting the family over money. I told her she had done that when she decided my account belonged to her plan. She hung up. After that, the messages shifted. My aunt said she had not realized the money was being pushed that aggressively. My cousin sent a single line saying he had thought the whole thing sounded off. One of the few people who actually surprised me was Megan's husband, Tyler. He called me the next day and apologized for not asking more questions earlier. He said he had assumed my mother had spoken to me already and that the family was just helping. I told him that was exactly the trap. He was quiet for a second and then said he understood now why I had moved the money before the dinner. That was oddly validating. It proved the caution had been reasonable. I did not gloat. I just thanked him for calling. The practical fallout lasted longer than the emotional one. Megan and Tyler had to back out of the house. They lost the earnest money, which hurt them. My mother tried to tell everyone I had caused that loss. But the truth was simpler. They had moved too fast based on money that had never been theirs. That did not make the loss easier, but it did make it real. Ray later told me that if the lender had gotten further into the process and found out the contribution was never actually approved by me, the whole thing could have become a fraud issue. That sentence made me feel sick. Not because I had done anything wrong, because it showed how far my mother had been willing to go just to keep her story alive. She did not think she was committing fraud. I know that. She thought she was helping her daughter and correcting what she saw as my selfishness. That is one of the nastier parts of family manipulation. The person doing it usually has a moral excuse ready. That does not make it less destructive. A week later, I went to the credit union in person and sat across from an actual banker who knew how to talk about account security without sounding like he was reading from a script. He helped me lock everything down properly. I closed out the old account. I reviewed my beneficiary forms. I removed any stale recovery methods. I set up alerts for transfers, withdrawals, and login attempts. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I had a system instead of a habit. Ray came with me because he said he liked seeing people take control of their own paperwork. That was the kind of thing that sounds boring until you understand how much peace it buys. My mother kept trying to reframe the story over the next month. Sometimes she acted wounded. Sometimes she acted confused. Sometimes she acted like she had merely suggested a family loan. And I had overreacted because I was sensitive about being single. The thing is, once you have the texts and the bank records, those performances start sounding small. Not because they do not hurt, because they stop being mysterious. My mother had one more move left, and I saw it coming because she had always relied on the same tactic. She started telling extended family that I had hidden money from everyone and made Megan lose the house on purpose. That was the version she hoped would spread fastest because it was emotionally simple. I had to decide whether to keep defending myself to every person individually or let the evidence speak for itself. I chose the second option. I forwarded the same documents every time someone asked. No long explanation, no ranting, just the paper trail. That got old fast because facts are less entertaining than gossip. By the end of the second month, most people had stopped asking. My mother had not apologized in any way that mattered, but she had stopped trying to corner me in person. That was a victory of a sort. Megan and I did not magically become close again. We had too much history for that. But she did send me a message one night saying she had replayed the whole thing in her head and realized our mother had told her I was already in. She said she had been embarrassed and desperate and had wanted to believe it was true. That was the first honest thing she had said to me in years. I told her I understood desperation. I did not tell her I had been desperate too, just for a different thing. I had been desperate to keep one part of my life private and safe. That is a strange thing to have to defend from your own family. Months passed. I kept saving. I kept my routines. I stopped answering my mother's calls unless they were about something concrete, like a holiday schedule or my grandfather's doctor appointment. That changed her tone. Nothing changes a manipulative person faster than realizing access is no longer automatic. She did not like the new version of me. That was obvious. I was no longer the son who explained himself into exhaustion. I was the son who said no and stopped talking. Ray told me he was proud of me, which made me uncomfortable because I am not used to praise that sounds grounded. He also told me he had saved my screenshots in a folder he called Family Insurance. That was the closest thing to a joke I heard from him in the whole ordeal. About 6 months later, I bought my own house. It was not a dream house. It had older floors and a weird back window and a furnace that made a noise every time it kicked on. I loved it immediately, not because it was fancy, because it was mine. I remember the bank appointment, the stack of papers, and the quiet satisfaction of signing my own name on the mortgage without anyone hovering over me trying to redirect it. That was the strongest feeling I had through the whole thing, not triumph. Relief. My mother found out through the family grapevine. Not from me. She sent a text that said she hoped I was happy now that I had chosen a house over family. I looked at the message while standing in my new kitchen and just felt tired. I did not answer. There was nothing left to prove. The ironic part is that my sister eventually bought a smaller place a year later with a better plan and her own money. No drama, no secret promises, no imaginary funds from my savings. She and Tyler had to adjust their expectations, which was probably healthier than the whole original scheme anyway. Megan and I are not best friends now. We are just less dishonest with each other than we used to be. That matters more than people realize. My mother still acts like I overreacted. She still tells the version where I became cold and unhelpful for no reason. But the family knows. Not all of them say it out loud, because families rarely like acknowledging the exact moment the favorite narrative dies. Still, they know. I know because the same relatives who used to pressure me now speak differently when money comes up. They ask instead of assume. They check before they promise. They have learned in the most annoying way possible that I keep records, and honestly, that has changed everything. I do not yell anymore when she calls. I do not explain myself into circles. I do not let people speak for my money or my future. The best part is that I did not have to destroy my mother to do it. I just had to stop pretending her version of reality was more important than the actual documents. That is what finally saved me. Not revenge, not a perfect speech. Just calm, preparation, and the patience to let the truth sit in the room until everybody else could see it too. And once they did, there was no putting it back.